The galaxy was vast, filled with countless planets, alien races, and untold wonders. But among the stars, there were those who had been forgotten by the galaxy itself. One such race was the Axelara. They had once been powerful, their technology far beyond anything most species could imagine. They had explored the galaxy, formed alliances, and even helped guide other civilizations. But then came the war. The war had devastated the Axelara. A deadly conflict with a rival species, the Zinthor, led to the destruction of their homeworld and most of their colonies. The Galactic Council, once their allies, turned their backs on them when they needed help the most. The Axelara were betrayed, and the rest of the galaxy watched in silence as their civilization crumbled. The great powers of the galaxy, who had once sought the wisdom of the Axelara, abandoned them in their darkest hour. Now, centuries later, the Axelara were a shadow of their former selves. Their planet was a barren wasteland, and the survivors lived in small, isolated communities. They had lost nearly everything: friends, family, their place in the galaxy. Their advanced technology was now a mere memory, scattered across the ruins of their great cities. They were a forgotten people, waiting for someone, anyone, to come and help them. But as the years went by, hope seemed to fade. The Axelara had learned to live in silence, waiting for a rescue that would never come. In the year 2457, the human crew of the Odyssey received a distress signal from an unknown source. It was faint, barely audible, but it was enough to catch the attention of Captain Alina Drake. The signal was strange. It didn't match any known language or technology. It was an encrypted transmission, and at first, it seemed like a simple glitch, but there was something about it that felt important. Captain Drake was an experienced officer, known for her intuition and her refusal to abandon a mission once it was started. She had heard rumors about the Axelara, but she had dismissed them as mere legends. The records from the Galactic Council spoke of a race that had once been great, but now they were only a footnote in history. The galaxy had moved on. But as the Odyssey crew tracked the signal, they discovered its origin: a lonely, forgotten planet on the edge of known space. "Captain, the signal is coming from a planet that doesn't even show up on most star maps," reported Lieutenant Orin, the ship's communications officer. "That's odd. How could a planet be off the map?" Captain Drake asked, looking at the readouts on her screen. "It's possible it was erased from the records," Orin replied. "The planet doesn't appear in any recent surveys." Captain Drake's curiosity got the better of her. "Prepare the ship for a landing. We're going to find out who's out there." The Odyssey was a state-of-the-art exploration vessel, equipped with everything the crew needed to survive in the most hostile of environments. As the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, they were greeted by a sight that shocked them all. What was once a thriving world was now nothing more than a vast, barren wasteland. The landscape was cracked, with huge fissures in the ground and lifeless oceans. The air was thin, and the sky was an eerie shade of orange. "Do you see that?" Lieutenant Orin pointed to a cluster of lights in the distance. "They're not from any known settlement," Captain Drake said, squinting at the lights. "Let's go investigate." The Odyssey landed at a safe distance from the lights, and the crew set out on foot to discover what lay ahead. As they approached the source of the lights, they saw something that none of them had expected: a city, or what was left of one. The buildings were ancient, their walls crumbling and covered in dust, but they still stood. This wasn't a ruin. It was a place that had been abandoned, left to fall apart slowly over time. The crew cautiously entered the city, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they moved deeper into the heart of the city, they began to see signs of life. Strange, shimmering shapes moved in the shadows, but none approached them. The humans continued forward, drawn by a strange sense of urgency, as if the planet itself was calling to them. In the center of the city, they found what they had been searching for: the Axelara. At first, the aliens looked nothing like what the humans had imagined. They were tall, with shimmering, silvery blue skin, and long, graceful limbs. Their faces were angular, with large, expressive eyes that seemed to reflect the sadness of their forgotten world. They moved silently, watching the humans from a distance, their eyes full of caution and distrust. Captain Drake stepped forward, her voice steady. "We come in peace. We've received your signal. We want to help." For a long moment, the Accelera didn't respond. They simply watched, their faces unreadable. Then, a figure stepped forward, an older Accelera with markings on his skin that indicated his status as a leader. He spoke in a soft, almost musical tone. "You are the humans who have come to find us?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We are," Captain Drake said. "We're here to help you." The leader's eyes flickered with a glimmer of hope, a hope that had been absent for centuries. For the first time in a long while, the Accelera allowed themselves to believe that they were not truly abandoned. They were no longer alone. And so, the story of the Accelera's salvation by humanity began. The humans stood before the Accelera, their eyes scanning the strange, alien faces. The leader, an elderly Accelera with glowing blue markings on his skin, had stepped forward to meet them. His name was Elder Xelic, and though his voice was soft, there was a power in it that came from years of wisdom. His eyes studied Captain Elena Drake and her crew carefully, as if trying to decide whether they could truly be trusted. "You are the humans who found our signal?" Xelic asked again, his voice a mixture of hope and disbelief. Captain Drake nodded slowly. "Yes, we came because we received your distress call. We are here to help." Xelic stood motionless for a moment, his thoughts racing. After centuries of isolation and neglect, he had begun to believe that no one in the galaxy would ever care again. But these humans, strangers from a distant world, were offering help. A small flicker of hope ignited in his chest, but it was quickly tempered by the reality of their situation. "You are brave to come here," Xelic said, his voice heavy with sadness. "But do you truly understand what you are offering? This planet, this broken world, is all that remains of our people. We have nothing left." Captain Drake's expression softened. She could hear the pain in his voice, and it weighed heavily on her heart. She glanced back at her crew, each of them silently observing the alien race. They had seen their own share of hardship, but nothing like this. The Accelera had been abandoned, left to wither and fade away. It was clear that any help they offered would require more than just resources. It would take something deeper: trust, understanding, and time. "We understand that this is a difficult situation," Captain Drake said, her voice steady but compassionate. "But we can't turn away. We've seen the damage, but we also believe there's a chance to rebuild. You are not alone anymore. We can help you." Elder Xelic's eyes searched her face, as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded, his long fingers brushing over his chin. Perhaps there is something to what you say. But first, you must see the extent of the damage. If you truly want to help, you must understand what we have lost." With a wave of his hand, Xelic motioned for the humans to follow him. The crew gathered close behind, and they began walking through the crumbling city, the faint glow of their portable lights casting eerie shadows against the cracked walls and broken streets. The city had once been a marvel of technology, its spires reaching toward the sky and its roads gleaming with energy. Now it was a ghost town, a silent reminder of a once great civilization brought to its knees. "The Zinthor," Xelic said as they walked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were the ones who destroyed us. They wanted our technology, our knowledge. But when they turned on us, the galaxy turned its back on our pleas for help." Captain Drake listened closely, sensing the depth of the betrayal Xelic described. She could hear the anger in his voice, but more than that, she could feel the weight of years spent in isolation. For centuries, the Accelera had been forced to survive in a world that had forgotten them, with no allies, no support, and no hope. It was a pain that few could understand. "We can't bring back what was lost," Captain Drake said softly, her tone filled with empathy. "But we can help you rebuild. Together, we can find a way to start over." Zelek stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. "Do you truly believe this is possible? That your people, your species, can help us?" Captain Drake met his gaze. "We don't have all the answers, but we do have the will to try. We've survived wars, lost battles, and faced the unknown. Humanity has always found a way to rise, even in the darkest of times. And I believe you can too." There was a long silence as the two leaders exchanged a meaningful look. It was clear that the Axelara had never been offered such hope before. Zelek's expression softened, and for the first time since the humans arrived, there was a trace of a smile on his lips. Perhaps there is a way forward," Zelek said, his voice growing stronger. "We have knowledge, technology, but we have no strength left to rebuild. Perhaps you can teach us how to rise again." The humans and the Axelara stood there, surrounded by the ruins of a once great civilization. But in that moment, something had changed. A new partnership had begun to form, a bond built not on shared history or past alliances, but on a shared future. Over the next few days, the crew of the Odyssey worked alongside the Axelara, sharing what little they had to offer. The humans taught the Axelara how to adapt their ancient technology to their current needs, while the Axelara shared their knowledge of advanced energy systems and unique scientific discoveries that had been lost to time. It was slow work, but the spark of hope was starting to burn brighter. As Captain Drake walked through the city one evening, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The Axelara were a proud people, and though they had been betrayed, their spirit was not broken. Humanity's offer of help had not been in vain. Together, they would find a way to heal the wounds of the past and build something new, something better. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in centuries, the Axelara had found a glimmer of hope. And that hope came from the most unexpected of places, humanity. As days passed, the collaboration between the humans and the Axelara deepened. Captain Alinda Drake and her crew worked tirelessly with the Axelara to rebuild their shattered world. The bond between the two species, once born of desperation, had now turned into something stronger. Hope. Hope that together they could create something new from the ashes of a broken past. The first step in their journey was to restore the power grid. The Axelara had once harnessed energy from the stars themselves, but after the Zinthers' attack, their systems had been left in ruins. With the help of the Odyssey's advanced technology, the humans were able to assist the Axelara in repairing their damaged power cores and reactors. The task was far from easy, but each day brought new progress. The lights in the city, once dim and flickering, began to shine once more. Captain Drake stood on the balcony of the Odyssey, looking out at the city below. The lights were a small victory, but a significant one. The city, which had once been swallowed by the darkness, now had a heartbeat again. She could feel the change in the air. There was a new energy, a new purpose, stirring among the Axelara. Zelek, the elderly leader of the Axelara, approached her quietly, his glowing blue markings catching the light. "You have done what no one else ever offered us," he said, his voice filled with awe and gratitude. "You've brought us hope again." Captain Drake turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. Hope is a powerful thing, and sometimes it's all you need to keep moving forward. Zelek nodded slowly, his ancient eyes reflecting a deep, unspoken understanding. "You speak of hope, but you also speak of unity. It is not just hope that we need, Captain. We need the strength of unity, the strength that comes from working together." He had a point. Humanity and the Axelara were vastly different in many ways. Different biology, different cultures, different histories. But they had found a way to work together, to build something stronger than the sum of their parts. The humans had brought technology, knowledge, and determination, while the Axelara had brought wisdom, resilience, and their ancient understanding of the stars. Together, they made a formidable team. Over the weeks that followed, the humans and the Accelera began to explore even more ambitious projects. They started repairing the city's infrastructure, rebuilding damaged structures, and finding ways to make the planet more habitable again. The Accelera's advanced knowledge of energy manipulation allowed them to create new technologies that would help them adapt to their new circumstances. With the humans' help, they created self-sustaining farms, harvested fresh water from underground reservoirs, and restored vital communication networks. Each success brought them closer to their goal, a thriving, reborn Accelera civilization. But the work was far from finished. The Zinthor still roamed the galaxy, and though the Accelera had been abandoned by the galaxy in the past, Captain Drake knew that the humans would not turn their backs on them now. It was time to start thinking bigger. They couldn't just restore the Accelera. They had to protect them as well. One evening, as the sun set over the planet's horizon, Captain Drake called a meeting with her senior officers. The glow of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, and the air was calm, almost peaceful. But underneath the tranquility, Captain Drake could sense the tension. The Zinthor had caused enough damage already, and they would surely return to finish what they had started. "We've made a lot of progress," Captain Drake began, looking around the table at her crew. "But the Zinthor are still out there, and we can't let them come back and destroy everything we've worked for. We need to prepare." Lieutenant Orin, the communications officer, spoke up. "We've been able to patch into some of the old Accelera defense systems. They're not fully operational, but with some modifications, we might be able to activate them again." "We've also been working on a new ship design," said Lieutenant Kara, the ship's engineer. "It's based on Accelera technology, but with human enhancements. It won't be as powerful as the Zinthor fleet, but it could give us a fighting chance if they come back." Captain Drake nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. The Accelera had been betrayed by their allies, left to defend themselves against the Zinthor with nothing. But now, with humanity's support, they could stand strong together. If the Zinthor came again, they would not be fighting alone. "We'll need to train the Accelera soldiers," Captain Drake continued. "They've fought before, but they haven't had the chance to rebuild their forces. We'll teach them everything we know about defense, combat strategies, and how to work as a team." Zelek, who had been listening quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. "We will do whatever is necessary to protect this new future. We have lost much, but we will not lose hope again." Captain Drake smiled, a sense of pride swelling within her. She knew that this was only the beginning. They had started with small victories, repairing the power grid, rebuilding cities, but the real test was yet to come. Together, humans and Accelera would face whatever challenges the galaxy had to offer. And if the Zinthor returned, they would be ready. As the meeting ended, Captain Drake stood on the balcony once more, gazing at the city that had begun to come alive again. The lights were brighter now, and the sounds of life filled the air. For the first time in a long while, the Accelera were no longer alone. They had found something more powerful than just hope. They had found unity, and with that unity, they would rebuild their world, stronger than before. The road ahead would be challenging, but Captain Drake knew one thing for certain. Together, humanity and the Accelera could face anything. The peace that had settled over the planet was fragile, like a delicate flower just beginning to bloom. Days had passed since the humans and the Accelera began working together, and their efforts had made remarkable progress. Cities were slowly being rebuilt, energy systems were restored, and hope was beginning to flourish. But deep down, Captain Alina Drake knew the peace could not last forever. The Zinthor, the ruthless species that had destroyed the Accelera's once thriving civilization, were out there, somewhere, waiting. And the time was fast approaching when they would return. Captain Drake stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, her hands clasped behind her back. The crew was busy at their stations, monitoring the vast expanse of space around them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had spent years in space, faced countless dangers, and survived more battles than she cared to count. But this was different. The fate of an entire civilization rested on her shoulders, and she knew that the Zinthor would not show mercy. Lieutenant Kara, the ship's engineer, approached her with a concerned look. "Captain, we've picked up a strange signal. It's faint, but it's definitely coming from the outer rim. It matches the frequency the Zinthor used the last time they attacked." Captain Drake's heart sank. She had been expecting this moment, but that didn't make it any easier. "Prepare the ship for launch. We need to investigate this signal." The crew quickly went to work, preparing the Odyssey for the mission. Captain Drake could feel the tension building. Every crew member knew what was at stake, and no one dared speak the fear that hung in the air. If the Zinthor had returned, they would not be coming to negotiate. They were coming to finish what they had started. As the ship powered up and made its way toward the outer rim, the silence on the bridge was deafening. Captain Drake's mind raced with strategies, wondering what they could do if they encountered the Zinthor fleet. But there was no way to prepare for a fight against an enemy that had already wiped out an entire civilization. The Axelara, though resilient, were not ready for another war. They had just started to rebuild, and another attack would crush them. The Odyssey reached the coordinates, and they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The sight that greeted them was not one they were expecting. There, floating in the darkness of space, was a derelict Zinthor warship, a massive hulking vessel, its surface pitted and scarred from countless battles. But there were no signs of life. No Zinthor ships, no signals, just the wreckage of a once-feared war machine. Lieutenant Orin, the communications officer, scanned the wreckage. "There's no sign of life on the ship, Captain. It's as if it's been abandoned." Captain Drake frowned. "Keep scanning for any other ships in the vicinity. I don't trust it." The crew worked quickly, analyzing every inch of the wreckage, but it was clear that the ship had been inactive for some time. There were no active signals, no traces of Zinthor presence. It was as though they had vanished without a trace. Just as the crew began to relax, thinking the danger had passed, the alarm on the bridge blared. "Captain, we've picked up a new signal. It's moving fast, directly toward the planet." The crew sprang into action, red alert. "All hands to battle stations," Captain Drake ordered. Her heart raced. The Zinthor had not come in force, but that didn't mean they weren't planning something. The Zinthor had always been strategic. If they weren't attacking directly, it meant they had something else in mind. The Odyssey quickly powered up its weapons and shields as the new ship appeared on their scanners. It was a small vessel, unmarked and fast, racing toward the Axelara homeworld. Captain Drake's mind raced. Was this a scout? A decoy? Or was it the beginning of something worse? "We need to stop it before it reaches the planet," Captain Drake said, her voice filled with urgency. The crew worked quickly, but the small ship was fast and elusive. It darted through space like a shadow, evading their shots and narrowly avoiding their pursuit. As the minutes passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary vessel. It was built for speed and stealth, and it seemed to be leading them on a chase. "We're losing it, Captain," Lieutenant Kara said, frustration creeping into her voice. "We can't get a lock on it. It's too quick." Captain Drake gritted her teeth. This wasn't just a test of their abilities. It was a test of their resolve. The Axelara had been betrayed before, and they couldn't afford to let that happen again. If this ship was a harbinger of something bigger, they needed to act now. "Prepare to engage at close range," Captain Drake ordered. "We're going to force it into a corner." The Odyssey adjusted its course, following the fast-moving ship with determination. With every twist and turn, the small vessel grew closer. And then, finally, it made a mistake. It turned too sharply, and for a brief moment, it exposed its vulnerable side. "Now," Captain Drake shouted. The crew fired everything they had. A barrage of energy blasts hit the small ship, causing it to shudder and spiral. It tried to evade, but it was too late. The ship exploded in a burst of light, disintegrating into fragments. For a moment, the crew was silent. The threat had been neutralized, but the question still lingered. What had they just destroyed? The Zinthor were known for their devious tactics, and this ship, this mission, wasn't like the others. The crew knew that this was only the beginning. "We need to return to the Accelera planet," Captain Drake said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Prepare for immediate departure. We need to warn them. The Zinthor are coming, and this time, they won't stop until they've destroyed everything we've worked for." As the Odyssey turned to leave, Captain Drake's thoughts were filled with the weight of the coming battle. The Accelera's future, and the future of humanity, was on the line. But one thing was certain: they were ready to fight, together. As the Odyssey sped back toward the Accelera homeworld, Captain Elena Drake's thoughts weighed heavily on her. The destruction of the small Zinthor vessel had only been a temporary victory. The Zinthor were ruthless, cunning, and relentless. If they had sent a scout to test the waters, it meant the main invasion force was likely preparing its next move. "Captain, we've received a message from the Accelera leadership," Lieutenant Orin reported from the communication station. "They want us to meet with them at their capital, Celera Prime. They've been tracking the Zinthor's movements as well." Drake nodded, feeling the knot of worry tighten in her chest. The Accelera had been through so much already. After the destruction of their cities and the collapse of their society, they were beginning to rebuild. And now, they were on the edge of another war, one that could destroy everything they had fought so hard to preserve. The Odyssey's engines hummed as they made their way to Celera Prime. The Accelera capital was a city of towering spires and luminous streets, a testament to the incredible architectural prowess of the alien species. It had been devastated in the last invasion. But now, after years of recovery, it stood as a beacon of hope for the Accelera people. When the Odyssey arrived, they were met by an Accelera delegation, led by their leader, Chancellor Thorin. His once regal and confident demeanor had been replaced with a shadow of worry. The scars of the past war were evident in his eyes, but there was also a determination to prevent further destruction. He was no longer just a leader of his people. He was their last hope. "Captain Drake," Thorin greeted her, his voice thick with both gratitude and concern. "We've been following the Zinthor for weeks. The scout you destroyed was only the beginning. We've intercepted their communications, and their main fleet is already on its way." Drake's stomach churned. The Zinthor had been out of the picture for so long. Their cruelty had shattered the Accelera. And yet, it seemed they were returning to finish what they had started. "We've already dealt with one of their ships," Captain Drake said, her voice firm. "But that won't stop them. We need to prepare for war." Thorin nodded gravely. "We've been preparing for this moment since the first attack. But we are not ready. Our resources are stretched thin, and our people are still recovering. We can't fight this war alone." Drake's eyes narrowed. "You won't be fighting alone. Humanity is with you." The Accelera leader looked at her with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "But you've lost so many soldiers already. How can you?" "We're not the same as before," Drake interrupted, a fierce determination in her voice. "We've trained our forces. We've adapted. We've learned. And we will stand with you. Together, we can push back the Zinthor." For a moment, there was silence as the two leaders locked eyes. Thorin seemed to weigh her words, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Captain. We will fight together. But we need to act quickly. The Zinthor will arrive within a few days. They will not waste time. We must be ready." The meeting continued, with the two sides exchanging strategies and discussing how to combine their forces. The Accelera would lend their advanced technology and defense systems, while the humans would offer their experience in ground combat and tactics. It was clear that they had little time to prepare. The Zinthor fleet was on its way, and they needed every advantage they could get. As the meeting concluded, Captain Drake stepped outside the council chambers and walked into the open courtyard. The air was cool, and the soft hum of the city's energy systems filled the silence. Her mind was a whirl of calculations, plans, and worst-case scenarios. The stakes were higher than ever. This was no longer just about saving the civilization. It was about survival. And the Zinthor would show no mercy. Drake's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Lieutenant Kara, who had approached her quietly. "Captain, we've been receiving strange reports from our scouts. It seems the Zinthor are massing near the edge of the system. They're preparing for something big." Drake's heart sank. "How soon?" "Within hours," Kara replied, her voice tight with concern. "They're moving faster than we anticipated." She nodded, her mind racing. "Gather the crew. We're leaving immediately. We don't have much time." As the Odyssey prepared for battle, Captain Drake couldn't shake the feeling that this would be their hardest fight yet. The Zinthor were known for their speed and brutality, but the humans and the Axelara, working together, had something the Zinthor didn't: resolve. They had been through too much to back down now. It was time to show the galaxy that they would not be abandoned. They would not be defeated. The Odyssey lifted off from the surface of Solara Prime, and the fleet of human and Axelara ships gathered together, ready to face whatever the Zinthor threw at them. The upcoming battle would be fierce, but it was one they couldn't afford to lose. Not for the Axelara. Not for humanity. Not for the galaxy. The war was about to begin, and Captain Drake was ready. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. The fleet had gathered, human and Axelara ships, side by side, prepared to face the threat that had haunted them for so long. Captain Alina Drake stood at the command center of the Odyssey, watching the holographic displays of the approaching Zinthor fleet. It was a massive armada, far larger than they had anticipated. The Zinthor had come to finish what they had started, and it was up to the humans and Axelara to stop them. "Captain, the Zinthor fleet is entering the system," Lieutenant Orin reported, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "They're coming in fast. We don't have much time." Drake's eyes were fixed on the screen. The Zinthor ships, sleek and menacing, moved as one, a dark wave of destruction. She knew that if they didn't act now, the Axelara homeworld would be lost. She glanced over at Chancellor Thorin, who stood beside her, his expression grim but determined. "We will hold the line," Captain Drake said, her voice steady. "Prepare all ships for battle. We fight together." Thorin nodded, signaling to his officers. The Axelara fleet, though smaller, was powerful. Their ships were equipped with advanced weapons and shielding systems. The humans, with their tactical skills and ground combat expertise, were ready to complement the Axelara's technology. This was their best chance. The first wave of Zinthor ships entered firing range, and the battle began. Explosions rocked the space around them as energy blasts collided with shields and armor. The Odyssey shook with each impact, but Captain Drake remained calm, her eyes focused on the battlefield. "Target their lead ship," she commanded. "Fire at will." The Odyssey's weapons systems came online, and a barrage of laser fire streaked across the void, hitting the nearest Zinthor ship. It shuddered under the attack, but its shields held strong. The Zinthor retaliated immediately, launching a series of missiles at the Odyssey. The crew scrambled to evade them, but the sheer number of incoming projectiles was overwhelming. "Brace for impact," Lieutenant Kara shouted. The Odyssey twisted and dove, narrowly avoiding the missiles. Some of them collided with the Axelara ships, and Captain Drake winced at the sight of their ships taking damage. The Axelara fought with the fury of a people who had already lost everything. But the Zinthor were relentless. They had been here before, and they had the advantage of numbers. "We need to draw them away from the planet," Captain Drake said, her voice steady but urgent. "If they reach the surface, we'll be finished." Thorin's face was hard, his resolve unshaken. "We'll follow your lead, Captain. We cannot let them get any closer." The battle raged on, and the Odyssey danced between blasts, firing and dodging with precision. Despite their best efforts, the Zinthor were not slowing down. The larger ships fired devastating waves of energy, overwhelming the shields of the smaller Accelera vessels. One by one, the Accelera ships began to fall, their debris scattering across the battlefield. "Captain, we're losing ships," Orin reported, his voice laced with desperation. "We can't keep this up much longer." Drake gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to lose any more ships. The Accelera were too few, and if the Zinthor got past them, the battle would be over. She needed a plan, a way to turn the tide, and she needed it fast. "Lieutenant Kara," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Can you target their engines? If we disable their propulsion systems, we can keep them from advancing." Kara nodded, quickly analyzing the data. "It's a risky move, Captain. The Zinthor ships are heavily armored." "Do it anyway," Captain Drake ordered, her voice unwavering. "We need to stop them." Kara tapped a series of commands into the console, and the Odyssey fired another volley, this time targeting the engine cores of the lead Zinthor ship. The shot connected, sending a burst of energy rippling through the enemy vessel. The Zinthor ship shuddered, then lurched as its engines went offline. It was a small victory, but it was enough. "We've disabled their lead ship," Kara reported, relief in her voice. "But they're still coming." Captain Drake nodded, her mind already working on the next step. The battle wasn't over, but they had gained some breathing room. The Zinthor were relentless, but they weren't invincible. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," she said, determination in her voice. "Orin, can you hack into their communications? We need to disrupt their coordination." Lieutenant Orin's fingers flew over the console. "I'll give it a try, Captain." A tense silence filled the room as Orin worked. Finally, he spoke. "I've gained access to their network. I'm sending a virus to their command ships. It should scramble their communications for a while." The Odyssey's sensors blinked as the virus spread through the Zinthor fleet's systems. Suddenly, the enemy ships began to slow, their movements less coordinated. It was a momentary victory, but Captain Drake knew they had to act quickly. "Now's our chance," she shouted. "Target their remaining ships. Focus fire on their weakest vessels." The crew of the Odyssey launched into action, firing their weapons with precision, taking advantage of the confusion in the Zinthor ranks. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Zinthor ships exploded in flashes of light, their debris floating lifelessly in the void. But the battle was far from over. As the Odyssey's shields flickered under the strain of the fight, Captain Drake knew that they couldn't rest yet. The Zinthor fleet was large, and they had only just begun to weaken it. But for the first time in the battle, she felt a glimmer of hope. They were fighting back, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. "We're not done yet," Captain Drake muttered to herself, her gaze fixed on the battlefield. "This is just the beginning." The final wave of Zinthor ships was upon them, and the space around them was a chaotic storm of energy blasts, explosions, and debris. The Odyssey had survived countless hits, its shields flickering dangerously, but it wasn't just the human crew fighting now. The Accelera, who had stood strong beside them, were equally battered, their ships losing more and more strength with each passing second. The once united front was now showing signs of strain. Captain Elena Drake stood in the command center, her hand gripping the console as the ship shook from another explosion. She glanced over at Chancellor Thorin, who was giving orders to his people, his calm demeanor hiding the worry beneath. They had pushed the Zinthor fleet back, but now the time had come for the final push. "Captain, we have to finish this." Lieutenant Kara's voice was filled with urgency. "If we don't, we'll lose everything." Drake nodded, her eyes hard with resolve. The Zinthor were relentless. They had underestimated them at first, but now they knew how dangerous they were. And yet, despite their overwhelming numbers and superior technology, the Zinthor were beginning to falter. Their ships had been damaged, their communications scrambled, and their coordination was no longer as perfect as it once was. Now was the time to strike. "Orin," Captain Drake called, her voice steady. "Can you pinpoint the Zinthor fleet's command ship? We need to cripple it." Orin, still seated at his station, nodded. "I've been tracking their movements. The command ship is located near the rear of their fleet. It's heavily protected, but we can make a run for it." A deep breath escaped Drake. This was it, the final attack that would determine the outcome of the battle. If they succeeded, they could break the Zinthor's will to fight and end the war. If they failed, they'd be wiped out, and the Axelara homeworld would fall. "All ships," Captain Drake said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus everything on that command ship. We take it down, and we end this." The crew of the Odyssey worked with unmatched precision as they adjusted their targeting systems. Every gun on the ship was focused on the Zinthor command ship. Lieutenant Kara steered the Odyssey into a direct path, dodging the fire from surrounding ships, bringing them closer to their target. The Odyssey shook as it moved through the firestorm, but it held strong. The Zinthor ships were still fighting fiercely, but the damage they had taken began to show. Some ships were drifting in space, their weapons disabled or their engines gone. "We're almost there, Captain," Kara called out. "Prepare for a direct hit." The Zinthor command ship, a massive dark structure surrounded by a protective fleet, loomed larger in the viewports. Its shields were still strong, but Captain Drake could see weak points forming in its defense as the Odyssey's missiles and lasers struck its hull. This was their moment. "Now!" Drake shouted. Orin unleashed a barrage of electromagnetic pulses directly at the command ship's core systems. The pulses scrambled the ship's vital systems, disrupting its power and shields. The Odyssey immediately followed up with a barrage of lasers, hitting the now defenseless ship in quick succession. An explosion ripped through the Zinthor command ship, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The ship groaned, its massive frame torn apart as flames and debris spread across the battlefield. The remaining Zinthor ships, without their leadership, hesitated, and in that moment, the tide shifted. The Zinthor fleet, once relentless and organized, began to break apart. Ships started fleeing, retreating into the vastness of space, abandoning their comrades. The Zinthor were not used to retreat. They were conquerors, not survivors. But without their command ship, they were lost. "We did it," Kara whispered, almost in disbelief. Chancellor Thorin let out a breath, his face breaking into a rare smile. "The Axelara owe you humans more than you know, Captain. This is the end of our struggle." Captain Drake looked out into space, watching the last of the Zinthor ships retreat into the void. The battle had been won, but the victory had come at a great cost. Many lives had been lost, both human and Axelara, and the debris of shattered ships littered the void. The cost of this war would never be forgotten. But as Captain Drake stood there, watching the remnants of the battle, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven its worth. The Axelara had found in the humans not just allies, but saviors. Together, they had defeated a powerful enemy, and together, they had secured peace. "We fought hard," Captain Drake murmured to herself, her voice soft but strong. "We fought for each other." Chancellor Thorin stepped beside her. "Your people have shown us a strength we did not know we needed. The universe may have abandoned us, but humanity never did." Drake gave him a small smile. "We don't leave our allies behind." As the Odyssey's systems stabilized and the crew began their recovery efforts, Captain Drake felt a sense of hope. The war was over, but the true challenge had just begun. Rebuilding, healing, and ensuring that this new alliance between humans and the Axelara would last. They had proven that when the galaxy abandoned you, humanity would be there. And that was the greatest victory of all.